This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Isotope, Atom Audio, Jay-Z Microphones, and Spectra 1964. You're hearing my voice right now on the Jay-Z V12 microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX100D mic pre and C610 complementer with Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please remember to check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
My history with the Eagles, for instance, the first record I did with them was On the Border, and they had all the songs already written. Those songs were done. We cut that album in like, say, 3 weeks at most. And then the next one, one of these nights, there were maybe 3 songs written. And then when we hit Hotel California, there were no songs written.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. My recording studio is proudly powered by OWC, and I love how it's improved and sped up my workflow. OWC can connect all your audio work drives, trackballs, mix controllers, MIDI keyboards, audio interfaces, displays, or cameras so that you can work fast and focus on making your best record ever. Go check out the Mini Stack STX, Thunder Bay 4, or Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars to find the perfect solution for your studio from OWC. Psst. Hey Rockstars, over here. I've got a secret to tell you about how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of Recording Studio Rockstars. My secret is using Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you're hearing RX breath control, D-click, D-clip, DS, D-plosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, Neutron EQ, and limiting, all from Isotope. Go to isotope.com/rockstars and use the secret code ROCK10 and get 10% off any plug-in purchase from Isotope. You can tell your friends, but, be cool about it. Howdy, Rockstars. It's Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guests today are Bill Szymczyk and his son, Michael Szymczyk. Bill is a Grammy-winning and multi-nominated American music producer and engineer, best known for producing Hotel California by the Eagles. He has also produced many top albums and singles in the 1970s, though aside from continuing to work with Joe Walsh, he did retire from music in 1990 and then reemerged again in the late 2000s for select projects, including the 2007 Eagles album Long Road Out of Eden and the 2008 eponymous debut of Brian Vander Ark. Unlike many producers, Bill has no background as a musician. He was originally a sonar operator for the U.S. Navy and took some audio production classes as part of his Navy training. Besides his work with the Eagles, though, he's produced hit songs and albums for such diverse artists as B.B. King, Joe Walsh, the James Gang, and Elvin Bishop. Thanks so much to Rick Carson with Make Believe Studio for making our introduction, and also to Jonathan Roy. Please welcome Bill and Michael Szymczyk to Recording Studio Rockstars. Bill and Michael, are you ready to rock, guys?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
It's so great to have you here. It's really an honor and a pleasure to meet you. There's so much to talk about. I mean, I think, as you know, Bill, we are connected through some of the equipment that you made famous yourself. The MCI console that I have at my studio is one that you know so well. But before we dive right into that, say hello. Let us know in your own words who you guys are. And I sort of did a brief introduction, but it's great to have you here on the show.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it, for sure.
Indeed.
You go first.
About what?
Yourself. Tell the people what they want to know.
Bill, tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, it says that you're not really a musician first, but one of the things
not at all.
that really struck me with the sonar recording is I immediately think of Jeep Harned, and there seemed to be a thing about having a background in military electronics and then getting into music.
It does. It works. Yeah. Same with Tom Dowd.
and Tom Dowd, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's one of my heroes. Anyway, I through a friend of a friend. I was in the Navy from 1960 to 64 and learned sonar. They taught us day one in sonar school. This is a battery. Electricity flows from positive to negative. Next. And then 6 months later, we're taking apart a computer that, with vacuum tubes that's the size of 3 rooms.
Wow.
And it was pretty intense education in electronics. And when I got out of the service, I got a job in a demo studio called Dick Charles Recording in New York City that did mostly demos for songwriters. And that's where I got the start. And my job was to fix gear. I was there to fix stuff. But within like 3 weeks, it was like, oh, this is fun. I see what these guys are doing. And I started to pick up on, engineering a bit. And that's how it all got started.
So originally, a lot of the electronics that you were doing, that was all tube stuff, right? Because I don't think we were quite into transistors yet.
It was just on the verge. Just on the verge. I mean, it was a tube. The first console I worked on was actually a Neumann, was like 8 in and 2 out, and with vacuum tubes.
Wow.
And the studio was 2 mono machines, and you went mono to mono overdubs back and forth until, on the 10th generation, you could barely hear what the first one was.
Wow. And
because of the tape hiss.
Was this even, were you guys even using compressors and limiters and things like that at that point as well?
Not at that point, no.
So this is more like the classic, you just ride the levels to keep
exactly
levels uniform.
Right.
Maybe this is jumping forward a little bit, but one of the things that I think about when I listen to your incredible discography, and Rockstar's a reminder that we have a playlist in the show notes, so just scroll down. While Bill is known for doing Hotel California, I was blown away by all the other records that I discovered listening to that too. So please go listen to that. One of the things that I think of when I think about your body of work is electric guitar tones. So do you feel like your early start in tube electronics also helped you really grasp guitar amps?
I don't know if that really had anything to do with it. It's I tell you, the guitar players have taught me a lot about guitars. I mean, and a lot of it is just picked up by osmosis, but it's I don't think the tubes thing had anything to do with it, other than I know that most guitar players like tubes.
Have you worked with any good guitarists? I'm not familiar. Are there a couple?
Well, we can
You're
throw
funny.
out Joe Walsh there, and then gosh, so many.
Felder, Townsend, just
Yeah.
a couple
Yeah.
3
guys that might have a future if they keep plucking away.
Yeah, and it's cool to listen to all those different guitar tones too. I mean, I definitely grew up on classic rock and all these records. So these are the really.
I'll tell you another
meaningful
one. Another one is Rick Derringer.
Yeah.
Rick, I did an album with him, All American Boy, and he really knew I'm going to use this tone here, and that tone, and he had it all figured out before we even started the overdubs. So I mean, I learned quite a bit from him too.
Yeah, some very hot shot guitar playing too on these records.
Yeah. But Walsh overall was my guitar mentor, if you will, even to the point that he got sick of me not playing. And he bought me a real nice Martin 6-string. And he said, okay, here's 3 basic chords, E, A, G, do this. And I'm doing it. And my fingers are fat and they won't do it. And I give it back to him after 6 months. And I go, I give up. I'm going to play my console. You play that.
That's great. That's great.
Yep.
Well, let's see. We'll have plenty to talk about with that. But Michael, let's hear a little bit about you too. Tell us a little bit about your background. I know you guys have also recently made a record together.
Yeah, we've worked. We tend to try and work as much as we can together, just for the element of we enjoy being around each other, like professionally and otherwise. It's just, I really do have, like, it's going to sound corny, but I have the utmost just respect, admiration, fan level stuff for everything that he's done. So every time we get to work together, it's not only just fun because he's my dad, but it's also he's teaching me stuff constantly, or the folks that were around,
and vice versa.
And with the digital age, that's also true. But his music crew has been, like, I know how fortunate I am because most folks don't have this capability or access to some of these minds, but like, it's crazy to me. Like, Willie Weeks has taught me stuff, and Joe Vitale has taught me stuff, and Kenny Passarelli has taught me a load of stuff.
My gang.
Yeah, it's like this is his crew, and they've been able to teach me immensely more than I could have possibly hoped to learn on my own. And like, the just dumb luck fortune that I have being able to pick those brains doesn't, I don't take that lightly. So being able to do that is great, and that's kind of where what I constantly continue to do is just learn with every project, just try and learn stuff from these folks, and then learn stuff from the, people who are my age that we're learning. That's what it's taught me, was just learn every time you do something. So the thing that we just finished doing, we finished a couple projects. One is we worked on a single for a short film called The Family Meeting that was written, directed, and acted in by a really amazing new writer-director, Rebecca Usoro, and Dad and I got to do a single for that, and I did the scoring for that, and we went back and forth on mix ideas. For the single, we mixed it here at our studio and did the scoring stuff, and I was bouncing ideas, and that comes out on HBO Max. It'll be February of 23, so it'll be on there, so that's really cool. And then just this past Friday, recording date Friday, it was on the 28th of October, we had a live album come out from a really phenomenal R&B artist named Kona. And real name is Shatara Holmes. And she did the single with me for the short film, so we worked together a lot. And this was a live album that we actually recorded 5 years ago at a place in LA called the Bootleg Theater, which, if anybody that's listening knows that place, knows how it was such a cool hole-in-the-wall kind of venue. We loved playing there. The atmosphere was great. It was really artist and creative friendly. And then through the pandemic, they just had to shut their doors. And when they closed, I had these recordings from a residency we did there. We were there one night every month back in 2017, and we recorded the middle nights. And then I did a quick mix and gave it away for free to everybody that showed up on the last night as like a little souvenir. Because I said, I don't know if anybody's giving away a live album of the show they're about to see, so let's go ahead and try that just for fun. But we had these recordings sitting there, and when it closed, I said, we should mix it for real, just as like a little baby tribute to this place. So we did that, and that just came out in October. So he and I get to keep busy working on stuff together, which is super fun.
That's cool. Well, we have Retromagnetic is in the playlist along with
good.
Yeah.
Many other records. So Rockstars, please check that out. And it's, I was really struck by listening to, all these classic recordings from the 70s and then, and for decades, and then listening to this and, the difference in style. Obviously there is that you guys are able to cross over between a traditional analog studio and recording in a digital and computerized setting now. So talk to us a little bit about that. What are some of the ways that you guys connect those worlds?
Well, I can tell you that I'm glad that he went to school for digital recording, because that made I didn't have to learn it. So I got him now. Yeah. See, it's the old dog, new trick thing. He's the new trick. I'm the old dog.
And so tell us a little bit about your studio now. Are you guys working most of the time in a particular location and studio?
Yeah, it's here in Little Switzerland, North Carolina. We have a Toft audio design board and Pro Tools and a bunch of old analog gear that I've collected over the years. And it works for us.
And he's the analog gear, it blows my mind. He's used to it because he's had it forever, but we're talking like second generation LA3s and 1176s and some really classic, really classic pieces that he's had since
the Cooper Time Cube.
Yeah, the Cooper Time Cube, things that he's had since those Criteria days when he was working on your current board.
Yeah.
And then, so this place stays put. And then I have a digital setup in Los Angeles, which is where I live most of the time. But I can take that back and forth so we can kind of utilize different plugins and things of that nature. But it's cool because his analog brain imprinted on me before all the digital stuff, before I learned all of that. So I look at plugins and software as how it translates from the analog world. So I'm trying to find things what's the closest replication to, a 480L that I can find? What's the closest replication to, an actual hardware distressor that I can find? And so that I think that's how we merge the two pretty decently.
Well, I was just doing some recording this weekend and found myself making decisions about putting tape plugins on things and stuff like that. And then listening, okay, well, let me listen to that kick drum. Okay, now I'm putting the tape on it. Do I like that sound kind of thing? And my first thought was that we do that regularly in the digital world, but it might or might not have been done in the analog world. Of course, the tape version was, because you'd hear the kick, you'd hear drums in the input channel, and then you hear playback off the tape.
Right.
It's also crazy watching him adjust to things that you never would have thought have been adjusted to. I always use this as a good example. As I was coming up, because drums was where I got my start in music itself, was just like, that was the first thing I gravitated to. It's still the thing that I probably enjoy the most. So he was teaching me how to mic drum kits and how we go about that process. And it was always, a D112 on the kick drum and a 57 on the snare and 421s on toms. That was, he goes, we'll never differentiate from that. He goes, I've been doing this since he goes, I've been doing this since they first came out, and it sounds the best, and why do anything different? And that was a lot of people. And then Audix started coming out with some cool stuff, and they sent him I think it was
Vitale turned me on.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Joe Vitale, one of my favorite drummers. This guy's my favorite drummer, but one of my favorite drummers is Joe Vitale, and he was the one that said, you got to hear these mics. And so I think I got a snare and a
it was like their 57 equivalent.
And right. And then I said, okay, that's really good. Okay, let me get all of them. So now pretty much the entire kit, other than overheads, is Audix mics.
So it was like the willingness to change it, which is what you're talking about, because it's so easy to go back and forth with digital stuff, because at the click of a button you can hear what this plugin sounds like compared to this one, or this mic, digital mic sounds like compared to this. But in analog, it's more time consuming. So people found something they like and said, I'll just leave it so I don't have to go test a bunch of things sometimes. And sometimes you would just default. Yeah. So the willingness to be able to change with some stuff was cool.
Yeah. Do you think that's always a benefit to us, or do you think that sometimes we're faced with too many options?
I go with too many options. Totally. I mean, Hotel California, 24 tracks. That's it. Everything that you got is on 24 tracks. And the way I came up, like I said, mono to mono, just starting with that. And then very shortly after that, 3-track came in. That lasted for, a hot second. And then it was 4-track. And then everybody got real used to that. And people like the Beatles who really took 4-track to the limit.
Yeah. And
then shortly after that, 8-track. And once we hit 8-track, it was all bets are off until we got to 24.
It's funny to hear you describe that too, because we think about, in the digital age, sometimes we get frustrated with every year it's an upgrade, whatever. Right. We always got to upgrade this, upgrade that. I guess you guys were always dealing with that, weren't you?
Well, kind of, there was, I think, a lot more lag time.
I mean, was it a new tape machine every year or every 2 years? Not that fast.
No. It was the only time you'd change is when, there were more tracks.
Yeah.
And, from 8 to 16 was quite a long time. And there was a little period of a couple of people had 12 tracks for a minute, for a hot minute.
Who was making 12 tracks?
MCI.
Oh, really? Okay.
They had, I think, only a couple of just demos, and then that was it. I know Gary Kelgren in L.A., when he first opened the L.A. record plant, it was a 12-track for just a minute, and then went right to 16.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about your connection to Florida and Criteria and working down there, and Jeep and all that.
Well, I started my career in New York and got up to producer for staff producer for ABC Records, and they closed out in 1969. The end of 1969, they closed the entire New York ABC Records office and sent 3 of us to L.A. The guy that hired me and one other person. And so I was in LA for a year and 2 months until an earthquake in 1971 threw me out of bed and threw me to Denver, Colorado. So I was there for 4 years. And in the process of that, did a bunch, 3 or 4, maybe 4 or 5 albums at Jimmy Guercio's Caribou Studios.
Right.
And then he became so busy, I couldn't even get time there either. So I found myself for all of 1973 and the first part of 74 on airplanes every Monday and, going to New York, LA, San Francisco, or someplace, and just stacking up tons of miles. And I said, I got to stop this. I got to go someplace where there's a studio. And Tom Dowd was a friend of mine, and he was in Miami at the time, and he said, Billy, come on down here. It's fabulous. We're going to take a boat and everything. We'll go fishing. We'll make records. It's great. So I did. So that was in June, I think, of 74. I wound up in Miami and spent 17 years there.
Wow. Okay. So you basically moved to Miami.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And
That's
Criteria
cool.
was obviously there was 3 studios there. The Bee Gees had pretty much booked all the time in Studio B. Studio A was pretty much for Crosby, Stills and Nash and their bunch. And Studio C was kind of like, first of all, it was only a 16. It wasn't a 24 track. The other 2 rooms were 24. And so I told Mac Emmerman, I said, if you make Studio C 24, I said, I'll move in. And so he did, and I did.
Wow.
And that was the board that you now possess.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that. So Rockstars, just backstory. I have, I got a hold of a MCI console,
One of a kind.
yeah, a decade ago, more than that. About 2005 is when I first got a hold of it. And it has been in my studio for, good 15 years. And, but it originally came from Criteria Studio. And this is my first time having a conversation with somebody who really knows it. So I'm really excited for you to just talk about, were you part of the design and iteration of this console as it went into the studio or anything?
No, not at all. It was there. Like I said, it was a 16 track and Jeep, I think, took it back and just reframed it and made it into 24 and put it back in.
Right, because it has a routing section on the board,
right,
that is 16, but then there are switches where you can switch it to go
exactly. Yeah, that was
outputs.
That took me a little while to get used to that, but and then you have to kind of plan ahead on that too.
So I'll describe it. You probably remember this, but but it's touch sensitive routing.
Wonderful.
Matrix.
Those relays got me in so much trouble. And they saved my ass many times too.
So how would you use? Well, let me describe it first. Then I'd love to hear how you use it. So Rockstars, this is a row of strips of metal that are punched out, and then there's a little metal dot in the middle and a light, sort of a backlight. So if you touch it with your finger, we're used to this with iPhones and things like that these days. But back then, it was probably seemed like a really remarkable thing.
It was groundbreaking.
Yeah. So you would touch it with your finger and then it lights up and that sets a relay and it switches the output for routing audio through the console. How would you use it? Would this be how you'd comp things together or something?
Exactly.
Like that?
Yeah. This is how I would comp vocals, mostly vocals, but guitars also. You'd pull up four takes of the same song, one right next to each other. And then with just 2 fingers, one to turn one relay on, the other to turn the other relay off simultaneously. And it was just as quick as can be. So you'd hit both of them at the same time and you go from track 1 to track 2 or whatever.
That's wild.
And when Don Henley and Glenn Fry saw what I could do on that, that unleashed the monster. I'll give you an example. The opening line of Lion Eyes, City Girls Just Seem to Find Out Early. That is 6 different takes from 4 different days. City being one, T being another. This is how nitpicky we could get and did.
Wow.
So that was when they found out how quick we could do this.
Right, because this is long before the world of digital, where if the note was close, somebody might say, well, we'll just tune it and it'll get a little closer. Back then you had to sing it exactly how you wanted with the right pitch and everything.
There was no tuning.
But it blows my mind, the precision of being able to split a 4-letter word from 2 separate days, and the seamlessness of which, when you listen to the record, it sounds like, I think that speaks to the engineering, marvel that is that board, and also the consistency of the vocals and the creativity of the guy running the board to be able to put all those 3 together. If one of them fell off, you're not getting that, I don't think.
Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs. Whether you are setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class full-size studio for professional mixing and mastering in stereo or immersive sound. Featuring the XART tweeter and custom DSP onboard processing, the new A-series monitors will perfectly adapt to your studio. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for you with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. The Jay-Z Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia, featuring the patented Golden Drop capsule design for enhanced clarity that will give your recordings the classic vintage tone. Our friends at Jay-Z Microphones have also come up with a special offer only available to Recording Studio Rockstars listeners. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the V67, V47, or V12 microphones. And to make this deal even better, they'll throw in a free shock mount worth $120 for a limited time at jzmic.com. And so to reiterate, a process of comping would be having multiple takes on multiple tracks, and then you reroute it through this, and you could set a level of one track to another so that they sort of match up in tone and volume, and then you use these buttons to comp it together, and then that gets printed back to a different track.
Correct.
Now, would that get really complicated as far as, with 24 tracks on tape, how would you organize? I mean, there's you got drums, bass, guitars, lots of guitars.
In those days, I would probably have drums on 4. I would probably have, I know I would have, not probably, have the foot on one, snare on another, and most times the rest would be on 2 tracks, a stereo track of toms and overheads.
Yeah, you'd have to pre-mix them at recording.
Right. And then bass would be at most 2, probably even 1 if I was just doing it direct and or mix the 2 mic and direct together. And then 3 or 4 or 5, 6 guitar tracks, keyboard tracks, but always leave 4 or 5, 6 tracks open for working on vocals. And then I would say, okay, we're going to do these 4 tracks for vocals. And I would do the same vocal on, the whole for the song, and do 4 full performances of that. And then, punching in along the way. Well, that chorus is great, but do this verse again until you got 4 really nice, really, really well done. They could very well be, the answer as far as your lead vocal comp is. But then you put all 4 of them up and just start A-Bing, everything and nitpicking all the way down through the song. And then by the time you get done, you got your lead vocal over on one, and you've opened up 4 other tracks.
So, did you guys find yourself doing things like creating charts on paper to keep track of things?
Always. Legal pads up the wazoo.
You still have some of the track chart.
I do, yeah.
He still has track chart papers from the studio that he opened himself after Criteria. We were using, when we were first just making records at our house now for fun, he would pull out the tracking charts from that because he made so many, because he's like, I'm going to use these. event. So he just still has stacks of them, which is crazy. And I actually have a question because I told you I was constantly learning, and I just now thought of a question. Did the track space, the limited track space that you had as far as 24 channels, was that part of how you came about doing, because you would do the Eagles group harmonies, sometimes you just put all 5 of them around one mic and space them out physically, because now it's all background vocals are done one at a time, create your stack and your DAW and your DAW, and you're done. So was putting them around the mic artistically based? Was it track space saving, or was it kind of a combination?
No,
of
it was
both?
Well, first of all, you only had a couple of tracks
to
do it, and you had with 4 great singers, 5, I mean, if you get, and to get, well, basically it would always be 3, maybe 4 at most. And then the Eagles in particular were very, very good at blending themselves around, an 87 that was in open all the way around. And they within a matter of 1 or 2 takes, everybody knew, okay, I got to back up for her and, move in for this, and just basically volume control themselves. And so then we'd do 2 or maybe 3 tracks of those, and that was your background stack.
Because
it's sort of funny, Michael, your question is such an obvious question to ask now. And then when we think about it too, it's like, well, of course everybody was around a mic. That's how harmonies got invented, was people just singing together. And it's only through multi-track that we dissected it into something, where people could do it one at a time.
I know, because until he kind of brought that to light, I was like, oh, I never would have thought when I was younger, oh, that's how you used to have to do it.
Yeah,
because that was never a thing when I started actually working. That process, I mean, as far as what I've seen, that doesn't really exist too much. Getting 2 or 3 people just around one mic and having them blend themselves, because it's just easier to sometimes they're not even in the same room, or they're on different sides of the country, or whatever the case is. So having them do all that was like, oh, that is how you would have to. You just never think about it.
Yeah, more. I hate to say it, but more realistically, we just often find ourselves trying to sing around a mic, and we're like, whoa, that sounds terrible. We should probably all go sing it one at a time now. And then we can get it
you
right.
Lazy people.
So what about that, Bill? What do you remember? Maybe you didn't even have to think about it, maybe because people were used to singing together. But what were some tricks for making people really comfortable singing around the mic so that they sang naturally in harmony, a natural blend instead of something that felt weird in headphones or something like that?
Well, it was natural. I mean, everybody that I worked with that were background singers, that mostly the Eagles and those are the guys that were the most song, background chorus oriented, and they were very, very comfortable doing what we did. I mean, that was just the way we did it. When I worked with Crosby, Stills and Nash, same thing. They said, we'll balance ourselves out. Pretty much everybody else I worked with, it would either be like just a third above, harmony, 1 harmony part, or at most 2, because they were single artists. They weren't a band with a bunch of singers.
Was it common for people to do the 1 ear off kind of thing?
Oh, yeah. A lot of that. Yeah.
Did you ever find it? I remember seeing a picture of this from Abbey Road at some point, where they would put a speaker up, and then it looked like maybe 2 people were singing on either side of a figure 8 microphone, where the speaker was in the rejection part of the mic. Was that a common thing, or not necessarily?
I very seldom use that. I know a lot of people put the speaker out of phase so that, it wouldn't be picked up. But I found that to be more bothersome than it was worth.
Yeah, just easier.
And everybody I worked with, they were used to headphones. It was to be 1 on, 1 off. And so you could hear yourself, you could hear your blend, but also you could hear the track.
Now, how about this? Do you, I've also heard it suggested that when studios went from analog to start going digital, people started to, initially, to have a little bit more trouble singing harmonies and singing in tune in the digital world. And I often wonder whether, obviously a lot of latency can affect your ability to sing, but I've often wondered whether even just a little bit of latency can affect the way we're able to sing versus being in an all analog studio?
Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, early on you mentioned that in the 90s I retired for a while, and it is true. But the main reason was I was starting a new family. This guy.
Right on, right on.
And we were living in Miami, my wife and I, and Michael was about maybe 2-3 years old when we decided, okay, we got to move up to what was our summer cabin home in the mountains in North Carolina and build a full house around it. And I guess I just have to be a dad now. You know what I mean? Again.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand. I've got a daughter. Oh, go ahead.
In the process of that, the 10 years or so that I didn't work hardly at all, that's when it went from analog to digital. So when I got back in, like in the early 2000s, I had a lot to learn, to catch up. And thank God for him, for Michael. He had gone to school, and he said, well, this is how this works.
Yeah. We still had...
it was a sort of reverse, it was a reverse. I taught him, and now he teaches me.
But we still had up until, it wasn't until 2006 that 2007 maybe, that we actually got Pro Tools in the first place, or a new rig. We were still using I was still doing 24-track here. Yeah, we were doing 24-track tape machine on an Allen and Heath board that he bought when we first moved up here. And by the time, just before we got it through, I mean, the thing was glitchy. You'd have to punch it in 3 separate spots to get it to, behave correctly. But that's what I grew up learning was, I knew how to cut tape before I knew how to
Wow.
Start recording something in Pro Tools or Logic or even GarageBand.
Way to go, Dad.
Oh yeah, old school. Here's your grease pencil and your razor blade. Go to work.
There's a funny incident when he was in school at UNCA. His instructor, Jude, right?
Jude Weinberg. If anybody's looking to go somewhere to go learn something in school, their school age, Jude Weinberg is a great resource.
So he talked me into coming over and showing his class how to edit tape. And they had a 1-inch. Was it 1-inch Otari machine
I think it was
something like that. Yeah. And so I went in, gave a little talk about tape and so on and so forth. I had Michael go in the studio and play a pattern, and I said, okay, well, let's lop out this second verse or whatever it was, right? And so I do move the reels, make the mark with the grease pencil, and then move it on down and
find the kick drum,
find the thing, put it on the kick drum, make the mark, lop it together, and there you go. Which I've done billions of times. And one of the guys that was in the back of the room, standing next to Michael, after I first played it, after doing the first edit and playing it, the guy was like, "Shit, I can't do that on my computer."
And they were all super smart, and I felt going there my first year, I felt a little behind the game because they through no fault of anything here, I wouldn't trade what we did at all, but they were used to doing digital stuff, so they were doing GarageBand or Ableton or whatever was out at the time. They had come up learning how to do that, and I felt like I got the music, like the recording bug. I got that a little bit late in the game. I mean, it's crazy to say that like 19 is late in the game, but they'd been doing it for years. So I came in, I was really trying to play catch up from a digital side and learning from them how to do it. And then they said, we're going to cut tape. And they all just, there was, kind of, oh, I've never even touched tape before. And I was like, oh, this is the one day where I can come in and go, I know how to do this.
That's great. Well, I can empathize, Bill. So I always like to say my daughter's the best record I ever made. So,
there you go.
Going from studio to raising family, that's part of it. Well, cool. So let's see. I probably got all kinds of million questions, but tell us a little bit more about working on the MCI console down there and in that studio. Tell us some things you remember just about the studio. Maybe how would you describe it? I mean, when you look at old pictures, it just looks so cool, but there's not a whole ton of pictures to find,
When I was working there, I thought, well, that's a pretty nice size studio. And then years later, I went down to do a talk for NARIS. And I went and it's the first time I'd been in the studio in maybe 10 years, maybe even 15 or 20. And I went, damn, this is a lot smaller than I remember. That's the one thing. It was when we were making all those one of these nights in Hotel California there, it was orange shag carpet everywhere.
Wow.
And in the control room, there was a line of 4 old airline seats. That was the couch in the back. Very cramped control room, but enough in a very small studio. But we made it work.
What was the thinking with the airline seats? It just was clever and it worked?
I think he got them, at a yard sale or an auction or something. We'll put those in the back of the control room. That'll work.
That's wild.
Don't have to buy a couch now.
Now, what about the sound of the studio? I mean, I remember hearing about, Jeep seemed very attentive to the fidelity of the electronics that he was building.
Oh yeah, yeah. He would. I think Criteria. Well, I know Criteria was his testing ground for anything he was making new.
Yeah.
Or modifying in any way. And we would always be the first to get whatever the new thing from MCI was.
And then what about things like monitors? What would you use to listen to while you're
at that point? I was listening to JBL 4310s. I mean, there were big monitors, up in the faucets and everything. But I personally would have 2 JBL 4310s on mounts, console size.
Okay, so those were like near fields.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. I don't know those ones right off the top of my head. I probably do if I've seen them. Oh yeah, I know those.
Yeah,
those are great. So you'd put those up on the console. So your approach there, thinking was that you wanted to know what it would sound like if somebody was listening to this at home when it was finished.
Exactly. Yeah.
What about volume? I mean, were you cranking them up all the time?
Made loud to be played loud.
Made loud to be played loud.
He has this isn't Criteria based, but he has a pretty special relationship with studio monitors. Going back to his, I just want him to tell this story because it's
a good one.
Yeah.
So let's talk monitors.
Okay.
Gary Kellgren, he and I both started in the same little demo room where Dick Charles that I was telling you about, where we both got our start. He went on to design the record plant, and obviously was co-owner of the record plant with Chris Stone. And he went there and I went into producing. So years and years go by and he just opened the record plant in LA, so the first room. And I was one of the first ones in there, not the first, but maybe within the first month. And I brought the James Gang in to do Rides Again, the James Gang second album. And there's a track called The Bomber, which is made loud to be played loud. And Gary had these esoteric, I forget what they were, tannoy. There were like 12 tannoys to one monitor. And he was just so proud of these. And in the end of the playback of The Bomber, right where the drum break is, there's a huge foot. And about 6 of those went out. I blew up 6 of them, at least. And the next day, Gary comes in. He didn't get mad. He just goes to Tom Hidley, his maintenance guy, and he says, "Tom, make me a monitor Szymczyk can't blow up." And thusly, the Hidley monitor was invented that now is in hundreds of studios around the world. Wow. I'm responsible.
And he's just, as you told it, this is just Tom Hidley on the roof on 3rd Street building. And then just came down and said, "Well, see if you can blow this one up." And you went, "No, can't
do that." Then he went into mass production.
And those were the big soffit monitors.
Soffit monitors with that looked like wooden lips for the tweeter.
Right. Yeah, I think I know those. And then Tom Hidley also did these sort of compression ceiling designs back then, right? So what was that? And is that something that's worth talking about too? Was that a fun way to hear the audio coming at you?
I was someone that didn't really worry about whatever. That's how come I would do near field monitors almost all the time. And then for funs and giggles, we'd put it up top, and blow our ears out.
Yeah.
But the reason was I was working in so many different studios That's what I would take my 4311s or 10s, whatever they were at the time, with me so that, I always know what I'm listening to. I don't really care what the monitors here in San Francisco are or New York or LA or whatever.
Yeah. Hey, rock stars, are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble getting your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch or clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot closer to professional mixes. And it's my free introductory course called Mix Master Bundle. This course shows you how to get pro sound with your mixes from your home studio using free plugins and Pro Tools. And the best part is that these fundamental mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus, Studio One, Reaper, or whatever you're using. If you're ready to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com and get started now for free. And you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. I noticed you haven't brought up NS10s yet, but I guess that's sort of the same thing.
I hated those.
But like that idea of bringing near field
right.
monitors because you guys are traveling, you're going to different locations.
Right.
Would you actually fly with them on the plane?
No, I would have. I'd make those studios all get them.
Yeah,
because he had that power.
And then, speaking of power, what about amps? I mean, that was an important consideration.
Mostly Crowns at the time, Crown amplifiers. If they didn't have Macintosh.
And I think of Macintosh amps as being tube-based. Were Crowns also tube-based?
Yes.
Okay.
No, wait a minute. They weren't. They were solid state. Sorry.
That's what I think, but I didn't know if they started out tubes. Okay, cool. Well, let's see. What are we going to talk about next? What about the? I just want to keep going back to Studio C and Criteria. What about the sound of that board? So now that MCI console, one of the things that I always felt like I heard right away that I loved about it, a couple of things. I feel like I heard it sort of have this open, extended low end that I felt like it was hard for me to recreate that some other way. I don't know how else to describe it. Almost like if I did even a crappy mix on it, the low end still sounded great. You know what I mean?
Well, I've done a few crappy mixes.
And then
I didn't think that. I thought that board was pretty flat. I mean, as far as what you put in is what you get back, and I was not. I was very happy with it, but I didn't notice any particular idiosyncrasies of the board itself, which I think is good.
Another thing I remember noticing is that the mic pre's, the guitars always sounded great through those mic pre's. Yep. Something about it, just for rock and roll stuff, it just really, really seemed to come out nicely. I mean, I don't know if I played as well as Joe Walsh, but it was a lot of fun getting a good sound out of it.
There you go.
And then what about the stereo bus? Was there anything about the way, did you find that mixing, you would sort of push it to a certain sweet spot when you were mixing on it?
Well, I'm sorry.
Would you sort of push the mix to a certain level sweet spot? And then, does the board cause things to sort of compact more as it gets hotter when you mix?
I don't, to be honest with you, I don't remember. I quit working on there in 81, 82 when I opened my own place.
Yeah. All right.
And so then I moved on.
All right, cool. How about the studio layout and the rooms and the space? When you were doing Hotel California, how many there was one main room? Were there also ISO booths?
No, there was no ISO booths. There was a drum half ISO booth that I didn't use for drums. I'd put the bass amp in there.
Okay.
And then set the drummer up in an open space. And then there were gobos and everything, but no, there were no ISO rooms, no vocal booth, no nothing.
Well, that does bring up a question about bass. So if you were using setting a bass amp up, would you do direct bass as well at that point?
Yeah, both.
So you do both. And then what about just sort of the classic question of the phase relationship between a direct bass and a bass amp?
Sometimes you'd have to make sure that they were in phase.
Just flipping the polarity?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
No weird time alignment kind of tricks or anything like that?
No, And sometimes I would use either one or the other, depending upon what had happened after the basic track. Do I need both of these, or is it like the direct sound better with this track now that it's finished?
Okay.
Or does the, for rockers, does this live one, does, the amp sound better?
So just blend to taste.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's funny because we get into so much trickery with digital now these days because we can do things. We do so much. And
therein lies the problem.
Yeah. I often wonder, do we really need to do all this stuff? There's so many great records.
Was Victim of Love done at Criteria in that room? That one was?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know obviously in your vinyl graffiti you made the note, but I just know anyway that was 5-piece live. That's the whole track. It's just
exactly.
So that is the what is it? The textbook definition of what that room sounded like with your placement and sound and everything, and what little
3 guitars, drums, and bass.
Okay, so Victim of Love.
Yeah.
All right, groovy.
Even the solo parts were done live.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that is one of the things, when it comes to drums too, one of the things that's remarkable to me listening is the way that you have such separation in the drums. I mean, sometimes I record drums and I feel like, I might get some of that, but I listen to, Hotel California, not a particular song off there, but multiple. And then, I don't know, some of the Joe Walsh stuff on But Seriously, Folks.
Mm-hmm.
Just there's this real, you hear the snare is just right there, and then the hi-hat is just right there, and the tom fills come in, and they're very, very distinct.
Right. Uh-huh.
So what do you think about that? Were you even aware that you were creating such a distinct sound?
Yeah, I was trying to make Cinemascope records.
Yeah, so
I wanted it to go as wide as I could get it.
So let me ask it this way. How the hell do we do that?
Well, you put your snare in the middle and your foot in the middle, and then you pan everything else out.
Are we, if we're having trouble with that, is it that we might be just relying on overheads too much and we need more better close sounding drum mics?
Well, I think everybody's different, and every mix is different. But I would just, try to make it as widescreen as I possibly could.
Yeah.
I mean, that wasn't just the drums. That's everything, especially when it gets down to the mix.
Yeah, that's, I noticed that a lot of, guitars and elements happen way out on the sides, and then there's just a real space left for the kicks.
Yeah, I didn't like making binaural records. I wanted to make it, hey, you got stereo, use it, Yeah. I mean, and even though I would have, say, a hi-hat, it wouldn't be far all the way on the right or all the way on the left. It would be panned in just a little bit from the edge, but the overheads would be definitely far left and far right.
When you were talking about favorite drum mics and then discovering the Audix mics, what about overheads and the hi-hat mic, for example? What might be some go-tos?
My hi-hat mic I've used for years is a little Sony lavalier. It's like a lapel mic. It's for using, newscasters.
Oh, okay.
0 bottom in it, and you can put it 2 inches above the hi-hat, and it just sizzles.
Oh, that sounds great. So maybe that's part of it for us, is we just need to keep exploring until you find the one that just sounds right to you.
Yeah, I've never changed that.
No, that one never. That one, because I've seen other engineers, and it works too. But they'll take any number of larger condenser mics to mic a hi-hat whether it's been live or in a studio setting. But that was always, it's so striking to see just that tiny little lapel mic. But like you said, you can put it right close. There's no bleed from other parts, because Joe Vitale, depending on what he does, he plays loud. I can play
really loud,
super fucking loud, if it calls for it. And seeing that separation, but he's also, we've experimented with other types of vices. He's always got a 57 underneath the snare, one on top, but
I use the Audix.
Or the Audix on top. Yeah, sorry, the 57 underneath, but the Audix on top. But we'll take a little piece of mattress padding, and we'll tape it so that it covers like a little roof over the audix that's on the top snare. So that way it's a little more
doesn't go in it.
So the hi-hat doesn't go in it, so that maybe a little bit so that rack tom cymbal on your left side doesn't go in it.
Yeah.
And then just trying to close mic everything else in a way to where its directionality is at the thing, but away from other stuff. So if you can spread out your tom, I use 2 floor toms, a 16 and an 18 inch. If you spread out the 18 really wide, you start to get little bits of, okay, I'm not getting as much of the 16 in the 18. So he's putting a packing quilt over the kick drum mic just to isolate that a little bit further.
Now, would that be a mic that's the D112, and do you put that in the kick drum, or do you like to put it outside?
Now it's an audix.
Yeah, now I think it's the D5.
D5 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's,
D5, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I stick it in. Yeah, it goes in.
And we've experimented with like moon mics and mics that like sub kick on the outside, and sometimes they're there, and somebody's always okay. Cut your sound hole, stick it right in the front. We'll put like a pillow inside the kick drum with a big rock on top of it to keep everything stationary. But then some kick drums won't need it, so the pillow is like on the outside. He's always experimenting with how do I isolate the overtones and the sounds of each individual drum to be able to spread it out the way that you're talking about.
I love it. Cinemascope drums.
That's it.
I'm ready to start doing that. Now, what about the kick? One of the things that I feel like I might hear on a bunch of the records from that time is I'm thinking there's no front head on the kick drum. It's just a single head, or is it just really well muted?
A combination of both, but I would never have a front head on a bass drum.
Okay,
either all the way off or cut a hole in the front head.
Okay. And then as far as a kick mic placement, a typical starting place, is it usually in the center of the drum, or do you like
center
to
of the drum, but about a 45 degree angle to instead of putting it head on to the beater, slightly offset it somewhat.
Meaning it's almost like the mic's not quite looking at the beater; it's looking over to the side, and that just gets some of the brightness out of that.
Well, a lot of times you can pop a mic too if you got a guy that's really hitting it, and it creates a lot of air moving. It's no different than popping a P on a vocal mic.
Yeah, it's interesting. All right, we're gonna get to really geek out on some drum techniques now. This is awesome. I love it. Very cool. And then what did you say about the overheads before?
Early on, back in those days, I probably had 87s. For two 87s for overheads, and that was for a long time. And then I got some, I think it was when I was at Criteria, and they had some Swedish mics called PMLs. And Mac Emmerman turned me on to those. And one Christmas, he actually bought me a pair because it was my Christmas present, and I still have those. And then Vitali once again turned me on to SRs. And that's what I use for overheads now.
And would you typically think about overheads as being the spaced pair above the whole kit, or do you think of more as spot mic and crash cymbals?
No, over the whole kit, but with emphasis on the cymbals.
Okay,
on
great.
whatever, whether it was crash, ride, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, groovy. All right. Well, let's see. And then Michael, you mentioned putting a packing blanket over the kick drum. Maybe break that down a little more. Is that to protect the mic that is outside the front head on a drum, or is that, or am I thinking about it wrong?
No, you're absolutely not. And it was, if we do have a mic that's on the outside of that front head, it can be to isolate that more, because a lot of the kits that we end up miking together, the cymbals are, they're loud. They sing, and they're loud and they're bright. So to be able to take away some of that directionality from where they're sitting it's a clear line of sight to a mic that's maybe on the outside. So some of it would be to protect for that. But we've even done the packing quilt when there's just a mic on the inside for that same purpose, because then we would cut a larger than maybe normal sound hole on the front head to give more room to place the mic on the inside. Because like he said, he wants to try and put it at an angle. So we'd have the sound hole off to the side and a rather larger, so you can really place something in there the way you want to. And with that, you're getting a lot of that sound is a lot of that air moving is coming out of the sound hole anyway. So it's kind of escape. So to be able to put something on the backside of that to kind of tunnel in your kick drum itself sort of play. So it's not reverberating off the room or just escaping in general. It hits this dead spot and all of that meat kind of stays in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I guess another question I had about recording drums is, would you track it through gate and EQ, or do you just dial in the drum to sound that quick usually?
I did not use gates or EQ during the recording. Sometimes, yes, during mixing I would, but never during recording.
Now, what about the gates? Because there were built-in gates in that MCI console.
Right.
Was that something that was meant to be used as sort of a drum gate kind of effect?
I don't know what it was meant for. I did not use it for drums, though.
You didn't? Okay.
No, right. I would use it for, guitars that are too noisy or,
Just to kind of keep things quiet in between
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah. I didn't use gates very much at all.
Okay. All right, cool.
Attention, all rock stars.
iZotope has got you covered. With RX, Ozone, Neoverb, Nectar, and Vocal Synth, you'll have a collection of powerful apps and plugins that will help you get a professional sound in no time. Whether you're looking to clean up your vocal recordings with RX, master your tracks with Ozone, or add depth and ambience to your mixes with Neoverb, iZotope is your magic wand for awesomeness. Plus, with Nectar and Vocal Synth, you can easily add creative effects and unique textures to your vocals and instruments, from subtle mix enhancements to extreme sound design. iZotope takes your music and podcasts to the next level. Go to iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any plugin purchase. OWC is your one-stop shop for flexible drive storage and connectivity solutions for your studio. The Mini Stack STX for your Mac Mini adds 2 additional drives over a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and an NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, plus 3 additional Thunderbolt USB-C ports. Or the OWC Thunderbay 4 chassis, built like a tank, gives you 4 hot swappable 2.5-inch RAID configurable drive bays, plus an extra Thunderbolt 3 jack for daisy chaining up to 5 devices. Or check out the OWC Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock with 2 RAID configurable drives and 7 ports of connectivity, including a front-side SD card reader, 1 gig Ethernet, 2 USB 3.2 ports, and a dedicated display port, plus an additional backward-compatible Thunderbolt port. Get your studio connected with the Mini Stack STX, Thunderbay 4, and Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars. Use the custom link in our show notes because it's a great way for you to help support this podcast. So thanks, Rockstars. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the jam session, and my guests today are Bill and Michael Szymczyk, joining us from Little Switzerland, North Carolina. A very beautiful sounding place. You guys ready to jam?
Sure.
All right, cool. I don't really actually know what that means, but I like to say it's a jam session on the back half of this thing.
I like it. I vibe it. I'm with it.
So we're going to get into some questions that I've got here from our audience, whom I like to refer to as the rock stars. And so I'll jump in and do a couple of those. Some of them are just like fist pumping, kind of thing. So, Chris Finney's,
I can do that.
Chris Finney writes everything Joe Walsh, so it's not really a question. But I can add to that. When it comes to Joe Walsh, I think of the sound of those guitars. Let's start with electrics, and it's just got this really great kind of skronky or squonky, splatty electric guitar that's just so right where you want it to be in your face. And so I guess the question is like, what would you say about miking up a guitar amp with Joe Walsh in the studio? How would you guys work? How would you get those guitar sounds? It's so there have been so many records that Joe and I have done together, and
we've tried so many different things that it's, there isn't one thing like that. Wasn't like my drum mics or something. It wasn't like everything's going to be the same way every time. He would have many ideas about, well, first of all, amps. I mean, he has an unlimited number of amps, and he would go from one to another to another to another until he got what he was looking for. And then I would mic that. So it was more about the amp than it was about the microphones.
Would there be some go-to mics that you might try at first?
Anything. I mean, I would try anything and everything. Starting with a 57 and all the way up to a Neumann 87, and anything in between. Just looking for something that sounded good on that particular amp for that particular song.
Okay, cool.
So there was never any set, this pair of mics and this, those two amps. There was no.
What about as far as the playing? Would it be common for Joe to be out near the amp and playing, or would it be common for him to be in the control room with you, hearing it come back through the speakers?
During basic tracks, he would be out in the studio with the drummer and the bass player, the keyboard player, whatever. And then overdubs, we would always come into the control room and run lines out to the studio, just outside the studio door.
And then what about things like processing, like compression when recording a guitar? Would that be a common thing, or would that be
pretty much? Yeah.
Decision?
I mean,
okay.
Mostly like a light touch on a LA4 and 1176 and something like that.
Okay, cool. Well, I feel like a good takeaway for that is reminding us that, if you start out with a sound that already sounds like the sound you're looking for, then you've done a great bit of that.
Then get a transparent microphone and console
to capture it.
Really to capture that.
On the when I would like learning from him something outside of the technical. I know we like, especially from an engineering brain or a production brain or anything, we're always looking at the technical side of things. And something that I learned that I think is mirrored and reflected in his relationship with Joe is the psychological element of the process of creating records. Because that was always something that, whether it was unsaid or said out loud, sometimes both, that I learned from him was how important and how to relate to the people that you're creating with. Because watching him go with Joe, this is horrible, shameless self-promotion, but on the Retromagnetic album that's on, and I apologize for it in advance, on the Retromagnetic album, we did a cover of the first track off the first Barnstorm record called Here We Go. And I got to travel a couple months or a couple years before I did the cover and see Barnstorm and Bill here get recognition from the Colorado Music Hall of Fame for their work in Denver. And we got to see Barnstorm reunite for the first time in forever. Joe Walsh, Kenny Passarelli, Joe Vitale. And they played Here We Go. And hearing it, where they recorded it, and all these stories from all the people that were there at the time was incredible. And so I said, well, I want to do a cover. I wanted to do something fun. I'll do Here We Go. And I kind of did a little basic rhythm guitar track and some drums. And I said, well, I know Kenny will play bass. He's game for anything. So I said, Kenny, can you come play bass on it? He played bass on his fretless bass, same kind of style that he used on the original. I said, Vitale, I did the drums because I couldn't help myself, but would you want to play piano on it? Because he's a phenomenal keyboard piano player. So he did the piano. And then Dad and I called Joe and said, do you want to do a new solo on it? So he came and did a brand new solo on the track and lead guitar throughout the whole thing, which is just, it's him. So it sounds phenomenal. And then Joe's daughter, Lucy Walsh, sang the vocals on the track. And as we were mixing it, I was going, this process of creating art with this particular human, like, you two have been doing this for over 50 years, which is phenomenal. Like, that's crazy to me, the amount of work that they've done over 50 years, and the psychological element from the two of them that's behind that is, it's astounding. That's such a long time to be doing it, and at a high level where it still sounds good. You
guys have what we like to refer to as mind speak. You don't have to say it in words, probably, right? Yeah.
I have that with a few people. Joe being one of them.
Yeah, that's great. What about, I'm going to keep asking guitar questions. Is there a strobe tuner parked on the console while you guys are cutting guitars?
No.
No.
Not on the console.
Right.
No. It's near whoever's playing.
But would you expect somebody to still come in with something like a strobe tuner, or would they come in with a little snark tuner clipped on the end of the
snarks? Just any number. There's all kind of, how many are there? How many tuners are there now? I've seen them all.
All right, great. All right, so let me see what else. Oh, vocals. What about on a record like one of Joe Walsh's record? Let me see which one I want to ask about. There's so many, but seriously, folks. For example, Life's Been Good.
Life's Been Good.
The big single. Vocal approach to something like that. How would you record vocals? I mean, consistently, the vocals that you record on the Eagles, on Joe Walsh, they all just sit so nicely right in the mix and so clear, but I never feel, it doesn't feel like a Nashville vocal up kind of thing,
Well, good. Thank you.
Yeah. So how do you do that? How do we do that? No, I mean, I'm with you on that. I don't want to crank the vocals up so much that they're just,
Well, I compress a bit. There's a certain couple of EQ things that I pretty much always go to, a little bottom roll off and maybe a little 4K boost, or, depending on who's singing. But then maybe up to 3, 4, 5 dB of compression. And that's it for the when I would lay it down on the master track, the 24 track. Okay. Now, for instance, in Life's Been Good, there's 3 different distinct vocal effects on there. Like on the verse, there are 2 delays, one on each side. Well, I think one's 40 milliseconds, the other's 80 milliseconds, or something like that. So it's a back and forth thing. And then when the chorus hits, it's a time cube, and then on the ending, I forget what it was, but I mean, it's just that's where you get to sit things in there and make them sparkle a little bit, while at the same time the vocal is still very much present but not overwhelming.
And where did you guys record that one?
That was at Bayshore, my studio in Miami, Bayshore Recording.
Wow. It just sounds so good. That one really, I feel
that was a great room.
I'm so happy you brought up that one specifically, because out of the hundreds of albums that he's done, even from a kid, that one was my favorite to listen to top to bottom. And so I would ask, I think I even did a school, it was like a senior dissertation. They said, pick something that you want to deep dive research in. And I deep dive research into that album. People were like, what is this? And they went out and did all the demos on a boat and recorded all the demos for that, just sitting on a boat and out off of Biscayne Bay, right?
No, down the Keys.
Or down the Keys, right, yeah. So they're just recording all the stuff out on a boat. And
when you say all the stuff, you mean like drums, bass, electric?
Yeah, they took a whole.
I took a drum kit, electric piano, bass, and Walsh with about 4 amps, and just put it all on a boat. It was a 72-foot motorboat named Endless Seas, and we took it down to Marathon in the Keys and spent 10 days rehearsing the whole album. And
I was going to say, this didn't fit in a 20-foot sailboat or anything.
No. I took a 4-track with me, though. I had a small console and a 4-track to record all these things on. And one tune, Theme from Boat Weirdos, was actually recorded. The basic track was recorded on the boat, and that's the original 4-track recording.
Wow.
That we added some things to when we got back to Bayshore.
And after the 4th track at the station, so on the vinyl side of it, that's the last track on side 1. The very first song is Over and Over, and then you get to the end of side 1, and after the song itself fades out, they fade in a little section of the first track, and it's from the boat itself. And I think this plays into what he was talking about, how he mixed the vocals and how he mixed the guitars and what he was using. It sounds like the record's floating on the ocean, or it sounds like it's in water. And you hear this bit from the first track come in that was recorded on the boat, and you know that they're on the ocean. So how to capture atmosphere in your mix is that's such a crazy example of that, because it just sounds like you're on the water.
Well, and just thinking about that song now, the groove itself sort of feels like you kind of feel the waves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Every studio needs a good vintage mic for that classic warm sound. Whether you're looking for those airy highs, sweet mid-range, or silky low end, a good vintage mic can put the magic in your mixes. So it's no wonder vintage mics have been loved and praised by thousands of engineers for decades. The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia using only the best electronic components and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for great detail and richness of tone that will bring that classic vintage vibe to your studio and be a real workhorse for your sessions. This time, our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer just for you, rock stars. Use the coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the Vintage Series mics V67, V47, or V12, the mic you're hearing right now. Plus, they'll throw in a free shock mount worth $120 for a limited time at jzmic.com. Atom Audio introduces the all-new A-Series line of monitors, featuring the XART accelerated ribbon tweeter design, built-in DSP-based room correction, and speaker voicings, allowing you to customize your Atom Audio monitors to fit your control room. The A-Series will rock in any studio. Small studio spaces or immersive multi-speaker configurations are perfect for the A4V or the new A7V, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. Mid-sized rooms and narrow spaces will love the low profile of the A44H, expanding on the A7V sound, or the A77H, a true three-way midfield monitor delivering rich, spacious sound. And bigger studios will love the A8H, a three-way speaker and the pinnacle of the A-Series that delivers extremely accurate sound required for critical listening environments. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for your studio with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. Very cool. That's just a fantastic sounding record. I guess a question that accompanies that is, when you're making a song like Life's Been Good, did you feel like you knew it was going to be the single and that you knew it was going to be a hit at the time?
No.
Or is there still a discovery of that kind of stuff?
No. First of all, we did that in sections. We did the part 1 and part 3 when we were actually making the entire record. The whole synthesizer middle part was not done until about 2-3 months later. And that was just done with Vitale and Walsh. So then, and then I had to lop that together.
And I guess I know this, I'm backtracking, but when it comes to things like tape, were there favorite tapes that you would use for all these, for making these records at that time? Or was that
most of the time I was using Ampex.
And
mostly Ampex 456, and then till the oxide started coming off.
At 15 EPS or 30?
15 Dolby.
15 Dolby. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That was my go-to.
All right, groovy. All right, well, here's another question. This one comes in from Ted Goldthorpe, and he gave us a bunch of questions. So
pick the best one.
All right. Well, I mean, they're all pretty good, but you know, you already answered the first one, which is how his service in the Navy helped and led him to a career in engineering and production. I think you kind of covered that.
Right, yeah.
I don't know if there's more you wanted to say about it. But then next question is, what was it like recording demos for Brill building writers like Carole King?
That was fabulous. The very first day I reported for work, like 2 days after I turned 21, and the owner of the studio said, well, why don't you just be a fly on the wall, go in the control room and just see what we do here, you know, and kind of get a handle on, you know, what happens here. Well, what happened here that day was a Carole King demo that Jerry Goffin was producing, and Carole was playing piano and singing, and there was a drummer, bass player, guitar player, Carole and piano, and Jerry Goffin, her partner and songwriter partner and husband at the time, producing it. And so little did I know that, you know, this was the songwriting duo of, all time. And that was my first session I've ever saw in my life. And later on, years later, I would hire Carol. She and I are still friends. And I hired her to play on a B.B. King record. So they'd never met. So the first time we show up in the studio and I introduce them, I say, Carol King, this is B.B. King. B.B. Carol, possibly you're related. And they were indeed musically.
Right. That's awesome. Well, my one of my oldest friends, Chris King, was in the studio this weekend, so maybe they're all related.
There you go.
Let's see. Yeah, so he was also asking whether there were demos you knew would be hits, and were you surprised which were hits when the song demos? Oh, were you surprised at any of those which were hits when the song demo seemed underwhelming?
No, I mean, there were so many, and every now and then on one of them would be, oh, I remember the demo on that song, and it was like 3 months later and it's a Neil Sedaka record or something like that.
Right on.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another one. What was it like to Chris in the Caribou Studios with Joe Walsh when it wasn't finished?
Oh, it was fabulous. This is one of the best times of our lives, as far as Vitali and me and Walsh. Jimmy had gotten the studio pretty much done. It was in the second floor of a big barn in Caribou, 8,000 feet in the air, and nobody else around. And he had almost finished the studio, but he didn't have any gear in it yet. And he was going to go be a movie director. He was going to go direct a movie called Electric Glide in Blue with Robert Blake. And so he said, well, I'm going to shut this down until I get done with my movie, and then I'll pick it back up when I come back in 6-8 months. And Joe and I begged him to put some temporary gear in just so we could work on his record. So he did. He put an MCI 400, one of the old blackface boards, and a 16-track 3M iso loop tape machine, 2 or 3 compressors, a little bit of echo, and left us alone. And there was no bathroom. We had to go downstairs and pee in the horse stalls, which are still dirt floor downstairs. We had to bring our own lunch, so we would brown bag it up the hill from Boulder every day.
And what were the records that you were doing there?
That would be Barnstorm.
Right. Okay.
And what was the second one? Was Smoker You Drink, the Player You Got.
Right.
And then the next one we did, well, those are the only 2 Joe Walsh records that were done fully there. But I also did the Rick Derringer album there. And I mixed a bunch of Jay Ferguson and Jay Giles band and stuff like that there. But then Jimmy got done with his movie and came back and took over the studio, and I couldn't get back in. After breaking it in for him.
This was high altitude as well?
Yes. So I think it's 8,100 feet.
How does that affect things like sound or singing, any of that stuff?
Singing was harder. Horn players, I didn't do any horn players up there, but when Chicago went up there to record, they had to have oxygen tanks by every chair.
Wow. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And I guess to a reverse question is when you went and did demos on the boat, I've heard people say that things, guitars, computers, things like that. You didn't have computers back then, but electronics sort of decay quickly out with the salt water and stuff like that. Is that something that you found?
Well, we only took it out for like a week or 10 days, I think 10 days at the most. So, I mean, I didn't notice anything.
Okay. All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Continuing the question there, could contemporary music stand to be improved if created in such isolated and natural settings as Caribou? Should you build such in your newfound safe haven in the Blue Ridge Mountains?
I don't quite understand the question.
Okay. I think it was just that, with the studio being at 8,000 feet and being isolated, do you think that that's something that would really help contemporary music? That's sort of tad.
I think any time you can get in a comfortable space where you're not bothered, it's to me that works the best for most musicians. Though there are some that want to, dive right into the city and be right in the middle of, everything in New York. But I prefer being out in the country, and I like to have windows in the control room and actually see outside.
Yeah.
That to me is, one of the lovelier points of where I'm looking at right now.
Oh, that's how you set up your studio. You can look out.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, that was something that I remember learning as we were doing the studio design in my place was that, I think when we don't know anything about it, we think, oh, glass, isn't glass a problem in a studio or a control room? And what I learned is no, because it's no different than drywall or any other hard surface. It's just a question of where you position things and where you put it.
Right.
So that's pretty cool. I'd love to be able to look out the window all the time. I've got a door that opens to the outside from my control room.
That's close.
There you go.
So I get a lot of fresh air.
I feel like atmosphere does play such a large part in your work, though, because, a Rocky Mountain Way is a really obvious, stupid example of how the atmosphere plays. But seriously, folks, and then the stuff that you maybe did in L.A., everything kind of speaks to the location that
a little bit.
Well, it's sort of funny. If I understood you correctly, Rocky Mountain Way was not the one that was done at Caribou in the Rocky Mountains? Or it was?
Most of the overdubs were. The basic track was done at Criteria.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think the only thing that was left from Criteria were the drums, piano, and bass. I think everything else, all the guitars, we did up at Caribou.
Okay, cool. I'm glad.
And also when he did the track, he didn't have any lyrics whatsoever. So it wasn't until we were actually at Caribou where he went, oh, wait a minute, now I know what this is about.
Yeah, cool. Have you seen a lot of different ways that people approach the writing on records? Some people have it all perfectly figured out before hitting the studio, and some people just leave it open ended.
I mostly start in the open ended portion. The Eagles, in my history with the Eagles, for instance, the first record I did with them was On the Border, and they had all the songs already written. And they had actually recorded a bunch of them with Glenn Johns, who had produced their first two albums. And then they decided they wanted to change in direction to be a little more rocky. So those songs were done. We cut that album in like, say, 3 weeks, at most. And then the next one, one of these nights, there were maybe 3 songs written. And then when we hit Hotel California, there were no songs written.
Wow.
And then we started.
No songs and you just hit the studio, or no songs and you start with basic riffs and grooves?
We had riffs and grooves. Actually, Hotel California, there was one. Randy had Try and Love Again. He had that song. And then everything else came in the process of making the record.
Do you feel like great records are made from a nice balance of knowing what you're going to do and having no idea what you're going to do at the same time?
Everyone's different. Some of them lightning in a bottle, and other times you have the perfect song, the perfect arrangement, the perfect everything, and it's a stiff. So what are you going to do?
Right on. Well, how appropriate. Here we are on Halloween, too, doing our interview, talking about stiffs.
Yeah.
All right, I got another question for you. This, again, comes from Tez, his last one. He says, the recent Beatles narratives, especially with the release of Get Back, seem almost desperately intentional to portray the Beatles as very close friends, even in the context of the seemingly contemptuous ending, because that's how the fans want to see them. The same is the case for the Eagles, although their history seems even more toxic, despite the fact that they did actually reunite. Are there any anecdotal stories that demonstrated a brotherhood camaraderie that existed in those last years before the first breakup?
Without giving away any family secrets, when I first started with them On the Border, they were all for one for all, and it was the ideal band situation. Whatever works, whoever needs to do what job on this record, you sing this, I'll sing that. Everything was very up and like I said, everybody, they were buds. They were good friends. They were buds, and they were, having a great time making records. As time goes on, for instance, one of these nights, we were going rocked out because that's what they hired me to do, was to rock them out some more. So I was all leading that charge, and Bernie Ledden was not quite, up to. He didn't like rock and roll anywhere near as much as he liked bluegrass and country, and so that started to fray there. He left. Felder came in. He was a rocker, so we were back on the same page. And then after one of these nights, that's when Bernie left. Was after one of these nights. And then Hotel California, Joe came in. And between Joe and Felder, I had the two best rock guitar players in the world. And everybody got along fine then. But then when you come in to do the long run, you're coming off one of the biggest albums in the world, and the pressure's intense. And that's when the all for one for all became, I'm in it for myself to a degree.
Now, what did it feel like to you being in the middle of something like that? And also, like,
keep the ship afloat.
Keep the ship afloat, even if you have to
keep it moving forward, albeit very slowly.
Yeah, amazing. Howdy, rock stars. Do you ever feel like you're spending all this time watching YouTube videos, trying out mixing tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes, but it's just like not getting you anywhere? Have you ever wished that you could have more of a simple and straightforward process for creating a pro mix that wouldn't take you years to learn? Look, what if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all of your mixing struggles and could actually coach you through them? If these are any of the questions that you're struggling with, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover this proven step-by-step mixing system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of the students. Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. It was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. That's from David P. Look, if you already understand the basics of mixing, but you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and check it out. In fact, I'm so confident that you're going to love this, that if you can't get a great sounding mix within 30 days, just send me an email and I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So go ahead and take your mixes to the next level like you know you want to at ultimatemixingmasterclass.com. What about work hours? What was it like for you in the studio? Did your work hours go from... did they stay consistent through your career? Or
yeah,
were you
pretty
sometimes
much.
All night long and other times?
Pretty much. I would start, every day we'd start around 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And then we would take a break for dinner and then back in and go until 1 or 2 in the morning. Usually a 12-hour day.
Okay. All right. Good.
And my idea was, the way this came about was I needed 4, 5, 6 hours of concentrate. Get this right. Be sober, be sane. And after 6, 7, 8 o'clock after dinner, then we can experiment. Like, for instance, we would work up a track from after dinner until 2, 3 in the morning, get it to where we really like it, the arrangement and everything like that. And then the next day would come in and I'd say, no drugs, no booze, no nothing until 6. And we have to get this track. And then we would concentrate on it and just get that track done. Nice. And then you'd hear mumblings. Is it 6 yet? And but they stuck to that. They dug it.
Now, just for context, what age were you guys all in this at this point? What decade?
77.
You guys are all in your 20s.
I was like 33.
33.
Yeah. 33 and a third.
33 and a third. There you go. Rock and roll. Awesome. All right. So here's another one. This one comes in from Justin Meyer. It's not so much a question, but he said, Bill, that you were also involved with some pretty avant-garde jazz stuff like Pharoah Sanders.
Right. He just passed recently, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Just in the past couple of weeks.
Do you have anything you'd like to remember from those sessions?
There was a guy that was the head of Impulse Records, the jazz label of ABC Records, and he and I became real good friends. We were kind of the outliers, the jazz guy and the weird rock and roll guy. We had offices way in the back so we could, smoke pot and stuff. And he and I became good friends. And he said, well, why don't you produce some stuff with me? And basically I would be engineering and Ed Michel's his name, and he would be the producer. So I would, stick an idea in every now and then, but mostly it was just applying rock and roll recording techniques to jazz. And that's the Ferris Sanders album, for instance.
I like hearing you tell stories about, working with someone and say, hey, let's do a record, it just makes it sound fun.
Well, that's to me that's the if you're not having fun, stop. Don't even go there.
What were some of your most favorite things about making records?
Mixing, tracking and mixing. Background vocals drove me nuts.
I wonder why.
It's good, yeah, because you invented too good of a way to do it.
Yes.
Right? City Girls just seem to find out early in 6 different. I wonder why vocals drove you nuts.
Yeah, mixing was like, you guys all go home and let me have it. Like, for instance, Hotel California, they were already on the road. So I basically mixed that all by myself at Criteria.
City Girls seemed to find out early, but unfortunately, Bill found out a little bit too late.
Yeah. Yeah. Here.
All right, cool. What was maybe you did answer that, but what was some of the things that you really did not enjoy about making records or the career aspect of it? Without giving away any family secrets.
No. I had a good time all the time. I mean, looking back, I don't remember. Oh God, I will take that back. The Who.
Yeah, tell us about The Who.
I'd known Pete Townsend since way early, and because the James Gang opened for The Who on what the first James Gang album when that came out, so that would have been 68 or 69, and so I'd met Pete then, and Pete and Joe were really good friends, and so after Keith Moon died and they got Kenny Jones, they said, well, let's get a different producer. They had Glenn Johns up till then, one of my idols. And so they hired me. It was the record from hell. They were totally hated each other. Daltrey would not sing rough vocals while we were tracking. So Pete had to do that. And whenever I was doing vocals, nobody else would be there. It was not fun then. And to this day, I wish I could remix that record.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the hardest one I did. It was also the only one I did overseas. I did that in London. That was the only record I ever made overseas.
Where in London were you guys?
It was at Odyssey, studio called Odyssey.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to something
Fun.
here. And, by the way, when you said have fun all the time, I think that's how you said it. It just reminded me that's a great Viv Savage quote from Spinal Tap too. Have a good time all the time.
Yeah, right. Have a good time all the time.
I'd also say you probably didn't enjoy doing live sound too much either.
No, but that's another story.
Yeah, I agree. I've done a little bit of live sound and I enjoyed the energy of it. But I didn't like the fact that it's really hard to get live sound to sound good compared to.
There's no glass between you and them. Damn it.
Yeah. In the studio, I can, you have some sense of, okay, this
right.
I can get this to sound really good.
It's the reason they call it a control room.
Yeah. Okay. Here's one from Johannes Eberhard. How did you get those Eagles records, Hotel California, for example, to sound so smooth as butter? Did you have a certain EQ strategy for doing that stuff? Like maybe no EQ.
Once again, everything is what is the song? What does it call for? What does this record call for? And if it sounds smooth like butter, then maybe that's just the way my sound was, for that. I mean, they are a vocal band, but we wanted to rock. So to get the two of those components together is, I think was the beauty of what those records were.
Am I remembering correctly that Don Felder played the drums or something like that?
No.
Am I saying that right?
He did not.
Okay, I remember noticing on the ending of, basically Hotel California, the thing that really struck me as I listened to it at one point, I was like, wow, it's like every couple of bars, there's just the most iconic rock and roll guitar riff, perfectly doubled, it seemed like. And then there's just a great drum fill, especially in the outro. Just like, why wait? Just give us another one,
The Hotel California, the track, the 6-minute record, had 33 edits in the 2-inch.
Wow.
And some would be just that drum fill.
Wow.
33 records on the 2-inch. 33 edits.
So you would put together the basic track and edit as much as you needed to edit and then overdub on top of that?
Correct.
Now, would you continue working on that same edited reel of tape, or would you then bounce that over to the 4 tracks?
Kept working on the same one.
Wow. And
sometimes to the point that the splice would slowly start to separate, and it would hit the head, and it would stop because the light could see through it on the tape machine. And I'd have to re-splice every one of them.
Okay, so next question here, same, which you have probably already answered, but tape machine, and console. So that would be the MCI Studio C.
Mm-hmm.
Tape 456.
Yeah, probably, or whatever was Ampex prior to 456. I forget what the numbers were.
And would the tape machine be an MCI?
Yes.
Do you remember if it was one of the JH16s or something like that?
It was the ones when they went to the dark brown color.
Okay, all right.
Not the light brown color.
I know that the MCI made ones. I had a JH16, and it was very. It didn't have a smooth punch, so then the touching for vocal comping would have been a nice solution because you didn't have to have a little pop at a punch in or punch out. But then they came out with the choir mod, which is a much smoother punch. All right, so then he continues. Sorry for being so geeky. In the end, you could have recorded that stuff on ADAT, mixed on an O2R, and I'm sure it would sound awesome because of the music and talent.
I don't know about that.
All right, good answer.
ADAT would just keep spitting out at me.
It's fun to talk about it, to say things like it's not the gear, but let's be honest, sometimes the gear really helps too.
Well, in ADAT land, I did a couple of albums that were done. I mixed a couple of albums that were done on a towering bunch of ADATs, and it would, for no apparent reason, one would just come out, and then you put it back in, and it wouldn't sync up. It was a nightmare. Those were horrible.
Early digital days for me.
Yep.
That was the beginning of my recording professionally, getting out of school, was ADATs. The nice thing about ADATs is they opened up a kind of a studio and an opportunity for me to show up and make music that I wanted to make. The not nice part was we couldn't wait to move on to other stuff like much better Pro Tools.
Right.
Speaking of which, I remember when Pro Tools made an appearance, we thought of it as a little side piece of gear, You'd use it to do a little thing and bring it back to the tape. And then one day the question was, why are we going back? Why don't we just stay on Pro Tools?
Well, you see, that's when I was retired, is when all that went down. Yeah. When I tuned back in 2001, that was the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah.
We've still used a hybrid situation where we've done a few records where after Pro Tools was really settled and he sort of came back and said, okay, I'll start working more frequently. And we would do the basic tracking to tape still, and then get it over. So that way we could, most importantly for drums, but also bass and rhythm guitars and stuff, make sure we had that sound. Because people now on Pro Tools, they want to emulate tape sound. And so we
Right.
would do it. So, okay, we don't have to emulate it. We know where to get tape, even though it's becoming less and less easy to find. And we would still be able to do that. But we would reuse the tape on other tracks. Okay, we got it. It's in Pro Tools, and go back to the start and reuse it a couple times because we don't have much of it.
Yeah, really. You can't find it anymore.
This episode is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own record, Skadoosh, the soundtrack to this podcast, in fact, using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. These techniques would work for you no matter what DAW you're using right now. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads to practice your mixing and even include in your mix portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Well, it's pretty exciting the way digital's getting better and better, and it's doing much better jobs of, emulating or bringing some of what was great in the analog world into the digital world. Actually, you guys might want to, Michael, I don't know if you want to mention, I think there might be some stuff that's worth referencing.
Hit it, Mike.
Yeah, we Rick Carson, who we have to thank for introducing us in the first place, is he has his own studio, Make Believe Studios, and they're getting into some software and plugin sphere. And he's such a bright, smart. He's an encyclopedia of gear and technology, and from decades back to now, he's just so on top of it. And we're working with him to explore turning your MCI board into a plugin that we can sort of disseminate to those.
Strip.
Yeah, a little channel strip to disseminate to those who might want to explore the sonic avenue that we've been just discussing today.
And we're going to put a little quick relay on it too.
Old school comping. So we're exploring that, and hopefully that and some other ideas that we're kicking around just to sort of pick from Bill's brain on, okay, what was your method and what would you use, and how can we package that in a way that other folks might be able to, pick from? Because why should I get to hoard all that knowledge to soak up? Why can't we spread it around to some folks? Because that's the best part of the digital age, is just the accessibility for anybody who has a creative itch to be able to scratch it. Yeah.
Well, it's exciting stuff. Well, maybe we'll just leave it at that. A little teaser, Rockstars.
Yeah, a little teaser.
There you go. Stuff that may be coming down the road. All right, and then I'll jump back to a question. That'll be very exciting. Of course, everybody will know about it when the time is right. This one is closing out for Johannes. He said, "Okay, while I'm at it, what is that kick-ass flanger on Life in the Fast Lane? Is it tape flange at 339?"
Yep. Oh yeah, it is. It's 4 machines.
4 machines. So
it takes 4 machines to do that.
How do you do that? I mean, I think sometimes we hear about stuff like that, but people don't really grasp it.
You have two tape machines that one plays. You play your track. Say you got four two-track machines. You got your mix. You play your mix. You record it on 2 identical tape machines, one of which you have a VSO on, a variable speed oscillator. Then the other one you leave constant, and the one on the VSO, you beat it against the one that is constant. And then you record the output of both of those onto your 4th tape machine.
Nice.
You follow?
Yeah. So you start with a mix of the whole song or whatever elements you want to flange.
Right. Whatever portion you want, you play that, then you put it recorded on two other identical machines. The thing is that the tape stack has to be the same. So you have the same distance between the record head and the playback head. Then you monitor both playback heads and you beat one slightly off speed up and down against the constant. And then you record the result of those two onto a fourth machine. Then you lop out the section you want and put it in your master.
Shit.
All right. Are you guys listening over at Welcome to 1979, Chris Marr? Because you're the only person I know that probably has 4 matching tape machines.
Yeah, really. That's it. That's the hard thing about doing that.
Good luck replicating that in 2022.
You got to rent stuff. Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
It's always been fun to do that. And it took me forever. Gary Kellgren taught me how to do that. And I'll tell you a funny story. This is back when he had just opened the first record plant, and I was just starting to be a producer. And I had a band called The Bold, and I wanted to phase something because he'd done this stuff with Hendrix on the Axis Bold as Love. And I said, Gary, I got to come bring a tape over, and you got to phase this for me. And he had his engineer build this box that did nothing. And he was doing it with his thumb, on the tape, slowing it down and so on and so forth. But he told me that it was the box. He said, I got to plug it in here and out here and out there. I said, well, I got to have one of those boxes. And he just started breaking up and laughing. and then he finally came clean and showed me how to do it.
That's
Son
great.
of a bitch.
That's great. So, yeah, I guess you could have one of the tape machines going a little bit faster, and then your thumb will slow it down to give it in the speed.
Uh-huh.
One takeaway for that, describing that. So, of course, now we live in this world of plugins, and you think, oh, I'll just put a flange plugin on. And I did that with a record for Hide Your Mamas, this funk band that I worked with. And one of the things we immediately discovered, was reminded of, is in your description, Bill, you create it, it's printed to the tape, you say, that was great. We love that one. You got it. Thank you. Now you've got a copy of it.
Right.
So that's the final one. In the plugin world, I think sometimes we forget that every time you press play on the track, it might flange it a little different than last time.
Right.
If you bounce your Pro Tools mix, it might come out different. So we ended up having to bounce it out, 5 different ways and then just decide which one we liked the best.
Right.
So just a reminder, rock stars.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. This one comes in from Larry Janis. He said, do you miss the console? It's kind of a mixed way of referring to it, but Bill, do you miss that MCI console?
I miss it only because, to be honest with you, because of the little relays. That's what I miss the most.
Yeah.
Everything else, I'm happy with what I got, but those relays were really cool.
Yeah,
because they did get me in a lot of trouble.
If you want to do it on another console, you've got to coordinate hitting mute buttons and unmuting things really quickly.
Yeah, and it's way clumsy.
Yeah, right on. Okay, and then David Brown, maybe you answered this one already, but David Brown says, how many edits on the 24-track tapes? I guess, what was the most edits for you?
Hotel California, 33.
Amazing.
On 2-inch.
Did you consider putting in one more third of an edit in there somewhere?
No.
Just a little top corner.
That's awesome. All right, let me see here. This one I like. It's hypothetical, but I like to ask it of all my guests, Bill. And then Michael, this is directed at you as well, but we're going to take the Wayback Studio machine and you go back in time and you find younger Bill and younger Michael. And you say, listen, I've come back to tell you this. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
Don't take things too seriously. It's music. It's not politics. It's not nuclear science. It's music. It's supposed to entertain. So entertain yourself and entertain the world.
Awesome. Michael, do you want to give any advice to yourself?
It's
Do what
funny.
Dad said.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I mean, we joke, but you're not wrong. Like I said about the dumb luck and the severe fortune I've had of being able to learn from these guys before I even really started my musical journey. They already taught me a lot of those lessons. So in like a pseudo way, he was kind of telling like an offshoot of himself, hey, don't take it too seriously. But if I was to tell myself, I would say, I would remind myself of the importance of diversifying what it is you can do for somebody else, because music is, outside of isolated circumstances, is collaborative. And that is where all of the magic happens, is from that collaboration. So especially in this day and age, be as diverse as you can. So like I started on drums, but I taught myself to play guitar and bass and keyboards and how to record in Pro Tools or Logic and how to mix, and learning how to mix from him, and engineer, but just continue to learn all these different things. And in order to just be able to, and compose for film and stuff, in order to go to someone and say, what story is it you're trying to tell? And all I want to do with my job description is help you tell your story. So whatever I can do to help you. I've done stuff from, doing copyrights for people because I learned, trying to do that. Just whatever you can do to help somebody else tell a story that's the gig. So be as diverse in what you can bring to the table as possible.
That's great. Good tips. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. It's an incredible honor to just be hanging out with you and
It's our pleasure.
Hearing you tell stories about all these wonderful records.
We'll tell lies anytime.
I'm definitely going to try and keep having fun all the time.
Yes, please do.
How can the Rockstars find you guys online? What if they want to learn more about you and check it all out? And they need to go check out your new record, Michael, too.
Yeah. I would say for Bill, just turn on the radio, because he's fairly
classic rock.
He's fairly prevalent. No, if you, the short film stuff we did, it's called The Family Meeting. That's on HBO Max in February. The live record from our beautiful friend and artist Kona, that's on Spotify, Apple Music, any of your streaming services of choice. You can get
Electromagnetic. I highly recommend it.
Retromagnetic. You can find that, just a fun project we did, just an excuse to hang out together. So that's Spotify, Apple Music, all those different type of places, and we'll just keep trying to have fun doing other things.
I love working with him mainly because he lives in LA and I live on the East Coast, and it's just good. If we're working together, get your butt over here and let's work together.
Nice.
And then we're together and hanging instead of 2,000 miles apart.
All right, I'm going to take, as a dad myself, I'm going to take that tip.
There you go.
Straight to heart.
That's it.
Thank
it
you,
works.
guys. Rockstars, thanks for listening. Thanks for your great questions. And I can't wait to meet you guys in person.
Can't wait. Thank you so much for having us.
care.
I appreciate it.
All right. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lij Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Hey, rock stars. I want to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible. OWC, Jay-Z Microphones, Atom Audio, Isotope, Spectra 1964, and Sampley. Plus, remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. At jzmic.com, use the code ROCKSTAR for 40% off the V V47, V67, or V12 microphones. Plus, get a free shock mount worth $120. And at Samply.app, use the coupon code RSR20 for 20% off. And at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off. If you enjoy Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the link in our show notes because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things that I use in my own studio, and I highly recommend them for your studio as well. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I want to also thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Braden Stremming, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.